On this day, 1993, Sylvester Stallone returns to big-time action blockbusters with the release of Cliffhanger. And we're back, like we never left. Welcome to episode 198 of the Confessions of a Not-So-Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Tuesday afternoon with me here in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. So today is the 31st anniversary of the release date of Sylvester Stallone's Cliffhanger. Directed by Renny Harlin, who was a very talented action filmmaker of the day. In fact, in the summer of 1990, had two movies. Adventures of Ford Fairlane, starring the, to me, iconic comedian Andrew Dice Clay, and Die Hard Part 2, Die Harder, with Bruce Willis. So Cliffhanger came at yet another crossroads. Sylvester Stallone had a lot of these points in his career where he turned left, where people thought he was going to turn right, did a little feint like a Rocky Balboa, switch from southpaw to conventional. You look at the first 15 years of Stallone's career proper after he became a big star. And he had the success of Rocky. And Rocky gave him the opportunity to do different kinds of projects such as FIST, where he was more or less playing Jimmy Hoffa, and movies like Paradise Alley, and then Victory, one of my favorites. But he settled into a conventional pattern starting in 1985, after the disaster of Rhinestone, where he attempted to be a country singer with Dolly Parton. Was it even a country singer or just a singer? I don't know. But he settled into what appeared to be a conventional pattern of action movies. Seemed to be what he was really good at. He had a way of acting with his body, with his face, with a gun. But you have Rambo, Part 2 that is, First Blood, 1982. You had Rambo, and then you had Cobra, another one of my favorites, even though it's a terrible movie, directed by the same filmmaker, George Cosmatos. Then he does Over the Top, horrendous. And he does Rambo 3. And he turns around in 1989 and has two movies in the action arena. Lock Up, which is, it could have been a prison drama if it had been handled differently, but it comes across like an action film. And Tango and Cash, which was a significant box office hit. But as he is famous for, and Sly was only 42, 43 at the time, restless. He decided he had to do something else. And I hate to say it, and I know the guys talked about it when they sat together with Harvey Levin for that special. Despite the incredible success he had to this point, 13 years after Rocky, it bothered him that Arnold Schwarzenegger was so good at comedy. And Stallone probably really enjoyed the movie Twins and got an idea of what he could do with the right material in a comedy. Because the irony is that Sylvester Stallone is a very funny guy. He does have a quick wit, but it doesn't always translate. And sometimes you just pick shitty projects. And the thing with Arnold is he was very, very careful. Very careful. It's why he didn't make the Tooth Fairy film, even though Hollywood was after him to make that movie for years. He just didn't think the script was there. His spidey sense, the only time it led him astray, ironically, was Last Action Hero. But that film is now considered a classic. It's understood that 31 years ago, the same summer as Cliffhanger, people just missed the boat. There was nothing wrong with that movie. We just didn't get it. I didn't get it, even though I was a target audience. Young film student, film geek who understood all the references and what they were trying to do there. I thought the film was a disappointment too. But Stallone saw the success of what Arnold had done with movies such as Twins. And then when he presumably heard that Kindergarten Cop was in the pipeline, it's the kind of project that he could have done that too. But he felt maybe he had gone to the well too often and needed to kind of try something different. So he went lower key period piece after this kind of big year in '89 where he had two major studio releases in Lock Up and Tango and Cash. And as I say, Tango and Cash was a box office hit. They could have made a sequel. Didn't happen. But Stallone made a period comedy, like a mafia comedy called Oscar. It was a modest hit at the box office, but not what he was hoping for. He was hoping for a runaway, huge smash, the kind of thing where he could, as Arnold, who he was developing a friendship with despite the rivalry, because they'd had their moments of friendship, and then there were other times where Sly just wanted to take his head off because he was jealous, even though he shouldn't have been. It's okay to have two people making similar kinds of movies where one guy is better at one kind than the other. Stallone's a great writer. Arnold's not a writer. Arnold directed one film, Christmas in Connecticut, the remake, did a nice job. But there are so many things that Stallone could have said, well, listen, I don't have to worry about this guy. He got to work with James Cameron. James Cameron co-wrote the screenplay for Rambo First Blood Part 2. But Stallone was never going to play the Terminator. There's no way he was going to be in that franchise. Although, if you believe in the multiversal stuff, in Last Action Hero, in the world of the film, the character that Arnold plays, Jack Slater, in the world of that movie, Jack Slater 4, the Terminator is in fact played by Sylvester Stallone. It's one of the top 10 funniest sight gags in any movie you'll ever see, because the identification with Arnold in that role is so strong. When Arnold, as a character in a different movie, is pointing out to a kid, hey, I love this guy, meaning Stallone, this is his best performance ever. He's fantastic. I mean, it's a fucking scream. That was the biggest laugh in the theater when I saw Last Action Hero. But Oscar was a modest hit. I think it was #1 at the box office for 2 consecutive weekends. It's kind of a quiet period in cinemas often early in the year when all of the Oscar bait for the coming Oscars is released in late, for example, would be released late 1990. The difference in 91 was Silence of the Lambs actually came out Valentine's Day, 91. But Oscar was, I think, #1 at the box office for 2 weeks straight. It didn't exactly set the world on fire. It got some good reviews, but nobody was saying Sly has found a new niche. He is a killer in comedy. Whereas, unfortunately for him and his psyche, the movie Twins was not just an incredible financial success, which it was, but it had to hurt Sly because the reviews that Arnold was getting was on the order of, we had no idea that not only could he be funny, but he's so perfect in this kind of role. It's like he's been doing this all along. We didn't know that Arnold was this. We thought, big guy, Terminator, he could deliver 2 lines at a time. But he actually not only got laughs, but he sold the heart of that film. He's really good. And that was not lost on Sly. So, okay, he tries comedy with Oscar. I know a number of people who really like that movie. And anytime people say, well, he bombed at comedies, they'll say, no. Oscar's a good movie. Don't say that. Perfect casting, Vincent Spano, he and Sly, there's a little... It's not a bad movie. First-rate production, and he looks like he's having fun. And there's something to be said for that, because one knock on Stallone through his career, certainly the first part, he takes himself too seriously. This is something that Arnold, right from the beginning, on screen, never took himself too seriously. There is something to be said for that. Poking fun at himself, poking fun at others, not getting upset if somebody throws kind of a gentle howitzer in his direction. It's okay. So Arnold's bigger than anyone else, during the day. If somebody wants to take a shot at him, you shrug your shoulders. The problem is that, and there's no way this story isn't true. There are projects that people circle in Hollywood, sometimes for decades. The 2020 Clint Eastwood film, Cry Macho, was a project that every major male star in Hollywood, with very few exceptions, had circled at one point or another, including Arnold. I don't think Stallone, but Arnold for sure. Again, Arnold's spidey sense, he didn't think the script was good enough for the sort of production they were going to put onto it. It's the kind of script that should have just been an independent film. That's the alternative explanation. You don't need a $30 or $40 million budget. You don't even need 10. This is not that kind of film. And Arnold knew there's nothing wrong with this script, but what you guys want to do with it, it's not going to work. So he stepped away from that one. But in the early 90s, as Arnold he had probably, I believe, just finished principal photography on Terminator 2, or he was wrapping up. He decided to fuck with Stallone. And the story goes that Arnold was going to do this comedy called Stop or My Mom Will Shoot. And Stallone got upset and frustrated because, hey, why didn't I get this? Why didn't somebody send it my way? But Schwarzenegger was never going to make that movie because he had read the script. He thought it was atrocious. But he throws it out there, and next thing you know, Arnold drops out. He was never going to make the movie, and Stallone goes ahead and makes the movie. And if you forget the terrible title, it doesn't seem like it necessarily has to be bad. You have a police officer, not a super cop, but a police officer whose mom, she has a little bit too much to say about everything in his life. That could be funny. We've seen movies in that ballpark in that same time frame, 1991, the last film, I believe, that John Hughes, the late great, ever directed, Only the Lonely, with John Candy as a Chicago police officer. They had a masterstroke of casting, getting Maureen O'Hara to play his mother, who pretty much runs every molecule of his existence. She is domineering times 100. So that can work. And Only the Lonely, a lot of people didn't like it. I really enjoy it. It's great to see John Candy in that kind of role. Still a little bit comedic, but his character is taken seriously. Maureen O'Hara is amazing. And Anthony Quinn, Jim Belushi in small roles, fucking kill it. So that's the kind of story that Stop or My Mom Will Shoot could have been. Title doesn't work, that's the first problem, and the movie was just a complete botch. It can't figure out what it wants to do. Is it trying to be an action film with Estelle Getty kicking ass? Like what? It's all over the place. Total fucking disaster, TFD. So Sly, when he finished that film, he knew the movie was going to be terrible. He's already had been in the business long enough. You start watching the deal, you say, oh my God, we are so fucked here. What the hell did I do? And then I'm sure word got back to him, Arnold was fucking with you. He wasn't ever he thought the script was terrible. You should have just called him yourself. So a lot of buzz in the still pre-internet era of 1992 going into 93. The word was that Stallone was going back to his roots. Whatever that means. Because remember, Rocky V had sucked, came out late 1990. Not good. Not good. That was the other problem. He went to the well, and that particular time the well had gone dry. Well, he made the wrong movie. Stallone couldn't figure out what to do with his main character. He kind of compromised. Film doesn't work. It's not good. I think it's the weakest film in the entire series, including the 3 Creed movies, which I believe are all terrific, if you ask me. The third one is not as good as the first 2, but I think they were all really, really well done. So, buzz begins to build. Stallone's got 2 action extravaganzas in the pipeline, one of which is a science fiction film that's slated for later in the year, a difficult production called Demolition Man. But first up, set to come out right around Memorial Day, a mountain climbing movie called Cliffhanger. And I'll never forget, a month or so before the movie Cliffhanger came out, there was an Entertainment Weekly cover, and you can find this very easily. There are certain magazine covers with Stallone which are famous. The one where he's completely nude, what the hell magazine was that for? It wasn't Cosmo, but it was like a Cosmo. Maybe it was Esquire, Cigar and Corp, whatever it is. It's Stallone's version of Rodin's The Thinker, and Sly looks jacked. Jacked. It's one of the best pictures of him. It's fantastic. I think it was right around the time The Specialist was coming out, but that's later. But there's that cover, and the other great cover, where he looks a little bit more human. He's flexing his bicep, but his arms look like they're about 16, maybe 16 and a half. He doesn't look like Rambo anymore. It's not 19-inch arms. No. this was heralding Stallone's return to the kind of movies that the audiences wanted to see. Action movies. Now, in the case of Demolition Man, pretty clever science fiction, but action movies. And the picture of Stallone on the cover was like, okay, I'm back in the fold. I tried comedy. One of them was okay. The other one was terrible. But now I'm going to go back to doing the kinds of movies I know you want, and let's fucking go. And on May 28th, 1993, my dad and I were living in Woodbury at what is now called Eagle Rock, Jericho Turnpike, just across the street from what's now an Equinox Gym. That was the old Syosset Cinema 150, then later just called the Syosset. Ooh, really sexy name, the Syosset, big deal. So we bought tickets and we sat in the balcony, figuring that it would give us the best view, and man, the screen was insanely, enormously large. I don't know how they managed to get this screen, but it was perfect. They had the sound, it was in stereo surround, 70 millimeter. The print was immaculate. And I gotta tell you, no spoilers, but for those who haven't seen it, there's a moment early in the film where there is an attempted rescue from somebody that is probably going to fall 8,000 feet or 6,000, whatever it is, to their death. It is a phenomenal action sequence. It is edited, it is scored, it is shot. You can't do it any better than Renny Harlin did it. And Renny Harlin, he had his ups and downs. As I said, he did Cutthroat Island a few years later, which is a movie not as bad as its reputation, but dollar for dollar, maybe the biggest box office disaster in the history of Hollywood, with his then wife, Gina Davis, who I love. Everybody loves Gina Davis. Renny Harlin, though, is somebody who understood how to blend practical effects done during production with CGI. Harlin did it as well as anybody. And in this movie, even someone like me, you can't necessarily tell, was this green screened, early era green screen? Was this done in the computer? Was this done during production? And that's when you know that a director is getting it done and hitting his marks. So this opening sequence, it looks like Sylvester Stallone and Michael Rooker and Janine Turner and a wonderful actress who only appeared in a couple of films, including Outbreak, named is Michelle Joyner. She was incredible in Outbreak, which was 2 years later, and in this movie, she's amazing. It looks like they are in the Rockies, thousands of feet in the air, and no camera trickery, no fakery. It looks like, well, not so much Michael Rooker or Janine Turner in this particular scene, but it appears that Michelle Joyner and Sylvester Stallone are literally risking their lives in real life for this shot. Sylvester Stallone, 18 years earlier in the Eiger Sanction, he executed almost all of the climbing by himself. And there are moments in that movie where you believe, well, this can't be right, because that's Clint Eastwood. There's no way he got up there. How did they do this? No, that actually was Clint Eastwood. He risked life and limb. Not the kinds of shots I'm talking about here. But Harlin's camera work, especially during that opening, death-defying, incredible action sequence where the tension is just off the charts, the swirling and the spinning of the camera. It's a masterclass in how to direct by a guy who, as I said, a lot of people, Renny Harlin, he's what was wrong with cinema. Hey, fuck you. Renny Harlin is an enormous talent. And we can take issue with elements of the screenplay of Cliffhanger, but man, is his direction good. And I just remember being dazzled. That opening sequence, unfortunately, I kind of knew what was going to happen. The Newsday review, which was a favorable review, they sort of spoiled what happened at the beginning. They didn't actually say it, but they set it up and said, okay, I know exactly how this goes. So no spoilers. The irony of Cliffhanger, looking back on it and going all the way back, is that it does have the elements of the typical Sylvester Stallone underdog narrative, the kind of Rocky narrative, Karate Kid, that kind of story, Vision Quest, where you have somebody who maybe is very talented but is not expected to succeed, and they overcome insurmountable obstacles. It has all of the elements of the Stallone film, which we saw in Rocky, in Victory, in Rambo, hell, even in Rhinestone, in Over the Top, where the world arm wrestling champion outweighs Stallone by, 150 pounds. I got 1,000, says I could tear your arm off the table. Dirtbag. Even in Cobra, he's up against a gang of serial killers. As tough as Marion Cobretti is, it's like 15-1. Those are not really good odds. You're a lousy shot. I don't like lousy shots. You wasted a kid for nothing. Now I think I'm gonna waste you. Gold, absolute gold. Stallone's line readings in Cobra, dirtbag. But Cliffhanger has all of those elements of the other Stallone films. You can call them classics, it doesn't matter. But, it's a die-hard movie, more so than a Stallone film. And the success of the original Die Hard paved the way for Hollywood throughout the 90s to make one big-budget, blockbuster action movie after another using the Die Hard template. What was the Die Hard, the original story? Smart alecky New York City cop trapped in a Los Angeles skyscraper with a gang of terrorists. But they're not really terrorists, they're thieves. Well, some of the Die Hard on a Die Hard in a Die Hard with a movies, they actually are terrorists. Jean-Claude Van Damme's Sudden Death comes out December 1995. Powers Booth, in that movie, kind of a terrorist, but he's also a thief. Executive Decision, Kurt Russell, Steven Seagal, John Leguizamo, Halle Berry. That's a movie about terrorists. They don't give a fuck about money. They just want to cause maximum damage. Toy Soldiers, terrorism. Passenger 57, terrorism. Well, they made a lot of them. Under Siege 2, terrorism. Air Force One, terrorism. Cliffhanger, John Lithgow's character is a thief. Now, the thing is, I love John Lithgow. I love the guy. He played a villain in Ricochet. He played a villain in Raising Cain. He played a lot of villains. I feel like Renny Harlin just let Lithgow do whatever the fuck he wanted to do in this film because, for me, he comes across like he's in a comedy. His line readings are so arch and are so over the top that he had to think this movie was a comedy or something because he's not playing it straightforward like a real villain would be. Contrast this to what Jeremy Irons does in Die Hard with a Vengeance. It's a similar kind of character. And Jeremy Irons at one point does the exact same thing where he bumps off a character on his own side because reasons. Lithgow reads his lines as if this movie is a comedy. He is over the top, sneering, snarling, smiling, and reading his lines in just a phenomenal accent. You want to kill me, don't you, Travis? Well, take a number and get in line. Gold, absolute gold. There's a basic plot. There's this disaster at the beginning of the movie, and then Stallone is out of the game, and he and Janine Turner kind of break up. They live, they had lived at the foot of the Rocky Mountains, we're led to believe, in Colorado. And then there's this other issue with his former friend, played by the always phenomenal Michael Rooker. What a great actor, still doing great work to this day. Guardians of the Galaxy, as Chris Pratt's, I guess he had been his guardian or whatever. He's awesome, so good. Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, maybe the most realistic serial killer film Hollywood ever made, although that was independent. It was an independent film. Without going into the major mechanics, Stallone gets called back to the mountain under false pretenses, and he ends up in the middle of what appears to be a terrorist plot, which is not a terrorist plot. It is simply a plot of theft, as Hans Gruber in the original Die Hard and Simon Gruber in Die Hard with a Vengeance, using the idea of terrorism to cover for what they're really trying to do. Cliffhanger is Die Hard on a mountain. Die Hard in the Rockies, whatever you want to call it. And similar to most of those movies, and similar to other films with Stallone, his character of Gabe Walker gets beaten upside down and inside out by the bad guys. Beaten up, left for dead, left to freeze to death. Just one crazy thing after another. But you know that Sly will have his moment. He will rise. Because there's no movie if all the film is the hero just getting the shit beat out of him at every turn. No spoilers. After that opening sequence, there isn't as much made about the mountain they're on and the kind of vertigo-inducing aspects of the opening sequence, the way Harlin is twirling and spinning with the camera and making the audience feel a little bit dizzy and off balance in a good way. In an edge of your seat kind of way. It settles into a conventional action movie pattern. Now, here's the thing, though. We can criticize Stallone, and unlike Arnold, Stallone has made so many bad movies. You know, Arnold made a couple of clunkers within the last 10 years, but he started to do different kinds of films, making more lower budget movies like Killing Gunther and films such as that. But as much as Stallone has made bad choices, he's a guy who is fully committed to his art and giving everything he's got to every project. He doesn't take movies off. He doesn't just collect a paycheck. And there's a famous scene, a plane-to-plane transfer, which the studio didn't want to spend an extra $1 million or $1.5 million or whatever it was going to do. They were going to try to have Harlan shoot around it rather than actually do it. Stallone kicked in at $1 million plus from his own cut to make sure they could do this. Now, it's easy to say, well, he's worth so much money. Not everybody does that, though. Just because somebody is worth a ton of money doesn't mean that they're going to say, you know what, I'm going to kick $1.5 million of my own money. That's a special kind of person. And I give him all the credit in the world. He knew what he wanted the movie to look like, just from the actor perspective. He didn't direct it. He knew what he wanted it to look like. And to him, it was worth a percentage of his salary and his cut. No, we got to get this right. So Cliffhanger ended up being exactly the comeback that Stallone had envisioned. It grossed more than $250 million at the global box office, which by any metric is a massive hit. And I think the film cost about $60 million plus, but still, it grossed back more than 4 times its production costs. That is a big hit. And he followed up with Demolition Man, which was a hit, not on the order of Cliffhanger, but it's a movie that the estimation and appreciation of it has only grown over time. Because it's science fiction, it has elements of Blade Runner and the great science fiction films, but it does it in almost a comedic way, poking fun at itself and poking fun at other action movies. And Demolition Man is really, really good. Got Wesley Snipes at his peak going berserk as Simon Phoenix. John Spartan, you are fined 1 credit for their violating the verbal moralities code. As so much for the 3 seashells. I only saw Cliffhanger in theaters that one time. And what I want to close on is that, for me, 1993 was the single greatest, well, it was the best year for movies ever. There are plenty of people that'll say, just on the strength of Pulp Fiction, Shawshank, and Forrest Gump, that it would be 94. And then there are plenty that say 1999, with Blair Witch Project, Star Wars Phantom Menace, American Beauty, The Matrix, Fight Club, Sixth Sense. I will always point to 1993 as the single best movie year. And I'm not going to sit here listing 50 films, but the summer of 93, some of my favorite movies ever came out that summer. Dave, Kevin Kline, which I've talked about, came out 2 weeks before Cliffhanger, all-timer. In the Line of Fire with Clint, a phenomenal film. Top 5 greatest thrillers ever? I got no problem putting it in there. The Fugitive with Harrison Ford, phenomenal. Searching for Bobby Fischer, phenomenal. Hell, even Rookie of the Year, you want a sports fantasy, incredible. There are so many great movies, and I didn't even mention Jurassic Park, the original, huge hit, and Arnold's Last Action Hero, which kind of bombed, but I would say is a terrific film, almost on par with the best work of his career. It's not Total Recall or the Terminator movies or Predator, but it's just a little bit below them. They all came out within a couple of months of one another in 93, and there are others that I'm just not remembering at this moment. But 93 was an incredible year for movies. And Stallone's big action comeback, which, did well for him until he made a bunch more kind of disposable action movies like Judge Dredd and The Specialist and Daylight, and then he had to reinvent himself again with Copland in 97. But that's a story for another day. This has been episode 198 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Tuesday afternoon here with me in New York. If you caught this episode on the YouTube channel, enjoyed it, but haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, and turn on those notifications. Or if you caught this episode on the audio platforms such as Spotify or iTunes, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, turn on those notifications. I'll be back with episode 199 real soon. Till then, peace.